Skepticism and discernment, fear and fascination, trusting, not trusting the unseen. That's right, soul traveler. We're diving into more ghostly encounters with the hashtag Ghostly Love campaign. So, in my previous video, I started uncovering and diving into some of my early childhood ghostly encounters. And much of that really involved a level of confusion and uncertainty and a lot of fear, so much fear, to the point where I really did start to develop a deep, terrified fear of the unseen. And this continued to develop in this way with the more experiences that I had of the ghostly type. And this didn't just include physically seeing, sensing, hearing, knowing that they were around me, but it also started to leak into my dreams. And I started to notice that some of my dreams became very prophetic. So I would dream of something and then it would start to unfold and it would occur. Maybe not as exactly as it had in the dream, but minor little subtle changes like the color of people's clothes or the exact words, but the concept and the premise of how they would unfold started to come about in my waking life. And so that started to add in to this deeper connection piece of learning to hone my skills, my abilities as a psychic medium. Even when I had these ghostly encounters that really terrified me, I still heavily relied on my own intuition and my own gut instinct to help me navigate through these experiences. So, anyway, we had newly moved into another townhouse from the previous one that I shared where I had the sleepover. And it was a really nice little space. It had a nice little backyard and it was a little further for me to walk to school, but it was still pretty decent. And yet the basement still creepy. And my room felt like its own safe sanctuary. There was a little cubby hole that was in my mom's room that was for storage that my mom would let us use as a little fort. And at first, the place seemed to be better than the previous place because it had a less creepier basement, I guess, if you will. And because the stairs didn't have that open back where somebody could reach in and grab you. And yet, weird things started to happen pretty quickly. I started hearing more and more whispers. We would hear a name, like our names being called. I'd hear Teresa. And my mom also shares that at some point in time, a couple times, as you know, my sister and I were gone to school, she'd be getting ready in the morning for work and she'd hear, Mom, just as though we were still there. And she would even answer, yeah. And then she'd realize that both us, my sister and I, were gone to school, and that she was supposed to be alone in the house, and yet there was some people there, and it seemed for the most part like it stayed pretty. I guess you could say kind of quiet for the most part, except for like just the name our names being called. We did have one light in the living room that would constantly go off. And you would go in, turn the light on, and you'd walk out of the room to say grab a drink or, you know, get a snack or something, and you'd turn around and you'd come back and the light would be off, and it would be a matter of seconds. And there was a lot of light flickering as well. There was a lot of murmurs and whispers, and you could just And you could even feel like sometimes you were walking through a denser vibrational frequency almost. It kind of almost felt like spider webs sometimes on your arms, if you've ever had that feeling. The switch here for this place was my dreams started to become very, how do I put this? Uh, Tormented, I guess you could say. And there was one particular woman who I seen a fair bit in my dreams. She was a beautiful, beautiful woman. I can see her clear as day still to this very day. And this was over 20 years ago. I had this experience. And she was wearing this beautiful white gauzy gown, and it almost looked like it was translucent. And she had the most beautiful dark, dark, dark black long hair, and her face was so just almost iridescent looking because it was so like white, and just soft and just so young. She was just so young and beautiful. I'd have to say she was in her late teens, very, very, very early 20s. She just looked so young and so beautiful and so vibrant. And feeling into her energy now, 20 plus years later, she was such a lovely, beautiful soul. And yet she was so tormented and tortured that she had no better way of communicating than to continue that torment of others. And I think, well, I know a little bit more, but I'm getting ahead of myself there. So she, in my dreams, she would visit me and she would stare at me and she would kind of float in the top of the stairwell, which exactly looked right into my bedroom. And she would point at me and she would just shriek, "Get out, get out, get out." And it was just terrifying to wake up in a cold sweat. And I always had to have my door open when I was in that particular place, actually. And to have my door open and sit up in bed and look right smack dab at the stairwell, right where she had been, just holding up her, ghostly arm at me and pointing at me and screaming for me to get out. And there was other times where somebody would knock on my door as I'd be drying my hair, and just various things. If I'd be working ways, I'd get random knocks on my door and I'd say, "Hello, who's there?" And then there'd be nobody there. I'd get up and open the door and there'd be nobody there. And it would be a constant state of flux like this. And um, there was one experience and this actually makes me laugh because, no, I mean, it makes me laugh and smile because I'm not in that situation anymore and I'm not in that experience anymore. And to hear my mom share her experience of me in this place is quite humorous. So this particular night, my sister and I had already been in bed for at least a couple hours. And, my mom would always usually check in on us and, when she came home and stuff like that. So this particular night, she was coming up the stairs and she saw me sitting up in bed and I was talking to somebody. And so she was like, she came just, not super quick or anything like that, but she came up, pretty steady and she was kind of coming to the door and she said to me, she goes, "Teresa, what are you doing? Who are you talking to?" She goes, "Why aren't you in bed sleeping?" and I said, "Well, I'm talking to I'm talking to this man." And my mom kind of paused and kind of looked around the room a little bit. And she's like, "What man? Who are you talking to?" And so I said to her, I says, "Well, it's a man. He's standing right there, Mom. Can't you see?" And I pointed right next to this little dresser that I had right by in between the door and the closet. I had a little white dresser there. And right in front of my closet, essentially, right at the end of my bed. And my mom looks and she goes, "Teresa, hey, all right, well, it's late and you need to lay back down and go to sleep, and you need to, you know, get rest for school because you got school tomorrow. Or she says something along those lines to me. And I I get frustrated with her because I'm having this conversation with this man, and it's obviously a pretty good conversation if I'm sitting up in bed and we're just, going back and forth. And so I get a little bit frustrated. And so I do eventually end up laying back down. And of course, my mom tells me later about this, and I have no recollection of talking to this man. And but of course, my unconscious was definitely having a very detailed conversation with him. And that's what's interesting, is that when we do go into this restful state and this sleep state, our consciousness kind of goes off and gets the rest, and then our unconscious mind can kind of come in, and we have these beautiful experiences and conversations with a lot of our guides, our higher self, and even like our loved ones can come in at this point in time too. And so it was an interesting experience, and I share this specific experience that my mom shared with me because a couple months later, or sometime within this time span of when we lived in this place, it was really early morning, and I would get up about 5 o'clock in the morning to get ready to leave for school. And so my alarm had just went off, and I had my window. There was a little bit of space between my bed, the window, and the wall, and I had my nightstand with my alarm just in that little tiny little cubby there. And so early morning, school morning, alarm goes off, 5 o'clock. I roll over and I open my eyes just very softly, and I go to turn off the alarm. In the motion of doing this, as my eyes kind of open up and I look, I see somebody standing in front of my window, right about where I normally stand and look out the window. There, in that brief moment of reaching over to turn off my alarm, my eyes half kind of open, a little bit sleepy still. I was still very much waking up from the dream world into the physical world. And there was a man. And in that moment, it was seconds. I want to say it was no more than 5, maybe 6 seconds of an interaction. In that moment, he looked down at me, and I looked at him, and I can still see clear as day what he looked like. And I said, "Oh, hi," like I knew him, as if I had connected with him and spoken with him. And it was a regular occurrence that he was just in my bedroom, just standing there, interacting with me. And he was an Aboriginal. He was a very weathered, very wise looking older man. And he had, the gray hair pulled back in the braid with the feathers. He was very, I don't want to say stoic, but he had this presence about him that was very soft and kind, and yet stern and firm. Very firm and stern, and very, strong. It was a very strong presence. And he stood there, and when he saw me move, as he looked down, not kindly, but not unkindly either, just looked down as if, oh, something caught his attention. And in that interaction, when I seen him and said, "Oh, hi," like I knew him, I closed my eyes, turned off my alarm, and then reality started sitting in. And my brain went, "Wait a second. there's a man in my room. What? There's a man in my room? And the moment I opened my eyes, again, he was gone. But he was not really gone. This was just, at this point in time, the way that I didn't allow myself to see the vibrational frequency that he was at. And so I would shift my vibrational frequency back down to not resonate at his frequency. So I couldn't see him with my naked eye because it was the only way that I could function as a teenager, well, even just as a kid growing up, to have some kind of quote unquote normal life, normalcy in my life. And so for me, here I am knowing I knew he was there. My mom confirmed me having a conversation with a man, and I know it was the same man that I was having the conversation with. Only now I knew at least what he looked like. And so for me, having these interactions of the unseen, it, as I mentioned in the last video, it was almost more difficult to explain the experience because I wasn't seeing them with the naked eye. So I had to rely on different ways that the universe and that my soul and my guides would bring me the information. And that would be through my mom or through that, that filmy haze when you're just waking up in the morning. And information would come in. So it's not that I wasn't receiving the information. It's not like anything stopped. It's not like I stopped having experiences with the unseen. I just stopped allowing myself to see them with my naked eye. And so I would see, feel, sense, hear, know things in a different capacity using my other senses, which did make things more difficult to explain because I could tell and I would know that there was somebody there or there was something that happened that I couldn't explain because I didn't have the tangible, details from seeing it with my naked eye. But I could explain it as, okay, well, here's just what happened. And my dreams, I would see a lot more in my dreams. And I think for the most part, the reason why things filtered through my dreams from kind of my understanding as I've been, continuing to work with my gifts and abilities, honing things really fine-tunedly over the last, 20 years, is because it was the only way that I could safely, I guess you could say, with my brain, which is perceive things in a safe manner for me to process and learn them in a softer, gentler way. So when things happened in the dream world, and I would connect in with spirits in the dream world a lot of times in that very early state. So, it's in that like hour to 2 hours before you kind of wake up. In that moment, that is where I would have many interactions with the spirits, and I would be doing a lot of the work, crossing them over, talking with them, interacting with them, and in a roundabout way, working on an unconscious level with the fear of the encounter with them. And this was necessary for me as I was in my teens and even in my early 20s, because it allowed me to break down the fear, the learned fear that had developed in my young childhood that continued into my teens. And so this was important for me because if I was going to ever do anything with my psychic mediumship abilities and be able to actually hone my skills to actually be of service in helping people cross over and connecting in with people's loved ones, fear was just something that had to be removed. And when I say that now, it's not that I really ever stopped or removed the fear, fear just became transformed. It actually had a path and an outlet and a direction to go. And I was given the opportunity to have some pretty incredible experiences that, although when let's just say if I was a kid or even a teen, that would have terrified me. As I got older, those experiences allowed me to see the beauty and the gifts in being able to connect in with the unseen energies. And so for me, it wasn't about necessarily why is this happening to me, because at one point in time I did feel like I was being punished in some way, or like I was not normal. When I would ask, why is this happening to me? Why can't I just have a normal life? Why do I have to see and sense and know all this stuff and can't really do anything about it? And it became less about me seeing it as a punishment and more about going, okay, well, I have these abilities for some reason. I don't know what to do with them. I don't know how they're helping me or what they're teaching me. And I didn't even really know how to explain them to anybody. And I do know that they also led me towards this fascination. I had such a fascination with all things supernatural. And I think at the time, Buffy the Vampire Slayer was really rampant. And so I loved, all things around the supernatural and, the vampires, the werewolves, and ghosts and things like that. But yet I had to be careful too how much I dipped my toe into them, because I almost feel like they would amp up the fear for me. And as I got to be in my high school years, that townhouse, we ended up moving. Ended up living in that townhouse with the guy and that beautiful woman. There was actually 7 spirits that were there, 7 ghosts that were there, and there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of activity that happened in the basement. There was a lot of activity that happened on the main floor, upper floor. It was a lot of activity that happened there. And I not only was dealing with the layer of how do I navigate my psychic abilities and yet still function as a teenager who's got rampant hormones, who's dealing with anorexia and dyslexia, and experiencing all the added stresses and levels and layers to that, and still unravel the fear around this. It was not easy to develop a trust of the unseen. I questioned so many things. Was this real? Did that really happen? How can that be? Did you see that? When I would see flashes of lights or when I would hear things, it'd be, did you see that? Did you hear that? What was that? And it was just like this. I was living on edge. And so in my later teens, when we actually moved out of that place into a house that wasn't far from that place, actually, I got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. I had to turn my dial switch all the way down. I didn't want to be bombarded with ghosts. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to hear them. I didn't want to know they even existed. I just wanted to have, quote unquote, a normal life. I didn't want to have to, figure all this stuff out, and I just wanted to go to school, come home, go to school, come home, and just get through the days. And I in some ways I really shut down. And it's interesting though, because even though I turned that dial switch all the way down, It still got through. It still got through. I was still a psychic medium. I was still an empathic psychic medium. I was feeling things. I was knowing things. I was sensing things. I would still have dreams. I would still hear things. It just was a little bit less. I would just ignore it. I just ignored it. And then fast forward a little bit. We were in the house, and for the most part, things seemed to be okay in the house. And this was when I was in my high school years now. And when we were in the house, I thought, oh, good, we're away from all of those, spirits and the evilness or whatever, the bad spirits from the last place, the ghosts. I was like, oh, good, I can finally breathe now. But at the time, when we had moved into this house, my sister was starting to, I guess you could say, exercise her own abilities, and things started to ramp up, I guess you could say, a little bit. There was definitely some spirits in that house. There was at least 3 that I know about. And my sister had such a horrible time in the basement. She wanted her bedroom in the basement of the house, and I stayed upstairs with my bedroom. And so she had some very interesting experiences happen to her in the basement, and I also had some very interesting experiences happen to me in the basement. So much so that I almost broke my nose one night. So my first boyfriend that I had, he would come over. We were watching a movie in the basement, and while we were watching a movie there, I had to go to the bathroom, and of course it was I can't remember the movie exactly, but it was a movie that was a little bit more spookier. It wasn't a horror movie or anything like that, but it was a movie that had a mystery spookiness to it. And so I got up to go to the bathroom, and I didn't turn on any lights because we had all the lights just turned down and off. And I ended up just using the light from the TV to kind of get me halfway down into the hallway. And then I was going to turn the light on at the end of the hallway so I could get into the bathroom. And on my way, about halfway to the bathroom, I felt somebody like almost kind of touch me on my back, and I went, "Oh my god, don't touch me!" And I started running, and because it was dark, I ran smack dab into I believe it was my sister's bedroom door jamb, because I was trying to get to the light at the end of the hallway really quick, because it was one of those little pull lights. And I ran smack dab into the door frame and almost broke my nose. My nose started bleeding. Thankfully, I didn't break my nose, but it freaked me out. I couldn't see what it was, but I knew I could see with my mind's eye that it was a person. It was actually one of the, I believe it was the female that was there. And anyway, I ended up going into the bathroom, cleaning myself up, and we ended up going back to the movie. There was another time where I was in the basement, and it was later at night, and I think I'd just fallen asleep on the couch. I think I was doing some drawing or watching a movie down there, and I'd fallen asleep on the couch, and all of a sudden I was woken up by this massive like clattering of something. And here it was all of these pop bottles, these empty pop bottles that my mom had up on the shelf there. It was like somebody had just come and went like this to them and just knocked them all over. And I was like, what the fuck? And I got up and I ran up the stairs, and I did not come back down those stairs. And my sister too, she had some things go missing in her room. She had this really cool I don't know, kind of like a wine bottle, but it was red. And she was burning some candles down them because she loved to see the wax kind of collect around the bottles because they looked really cool. And they do. And so she had Like she had about 5 or 6 of them in her room, and she had a particular one that she really liked, and it went missing. The whole bottle disappeared. And of course, she had a small little TV in her own room that she would, put some movies on and watch some TV in there occasionally when she was doing homework and stuff like that. And she would leave to go to the bathroom, or she'd leave to go get a drink, and she'd come back and the TV would be on, or the TV would be off, or the TV would be on a different channel. And yeah, just things like that would happen all the time. And I do remember the one day when I was in my room upstairs, actually, and nobody was home. It was just me, and I was working away on some schoolwork, a school project, and all of a sudden I heard this piano music, and I couldn't figure out where this piano music was coming from. I thought maybe it was outside, but we had already lived kind of in the neighborhood for a little while, and I had never heard anybody playing a piano from the neighbors or anything like that. And so I thought, sounds so pretty, like, because it was such a beautiful melody. And I couldn't figure out where it was going. So I kind of opened my bedroom door, looked around, and I was like, is someone playing the piano? And then the music immediately stopped. And I went, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. It was lovely. Keep playing. And then I went back to my room and the music started again. It was a little freaky, but at the same time, it was kind of like, cool and neat. And there was another time too where I heard somebody call my name, Teresa. And I was like, yeah, I thought it was my mom. And nobody was home. And it just on and on and on. That place was so active. There was so many things that happened there. And there was always somebody that stood and watched me when I went downstairs to do my laundry. We had the laundry room, and then we had a storage room right across from each other. Well, almost right across. The doors were just slightly off a little bit, but you could pretty much stand in the storage room, and you could look right into the laundry room right across the hallway. And there was always somebody that stood there. It was a woman. There was also a man there. There was also a younger kid. I want to say maybe late teens or so that were there. And and then we also had a light. This was a different light, not the same light that we had in the other place that would constantly go on and off. But this was a different light that we had. It was a little standing lamp, and every time where we had just turned that lamp on, it would be on for not more than maybe 2 minutes, 5 minutes tops. It would turn off. We would turn it back on. Sometimes if we would say, cut it out, quit turning the light off, we'd be able to get like an hour or two or whatever off of it. But then it would turn off. The TV would go on and off in the living room and upstairs as well. And it was just a highly active place that we lived at. Oh, I even the bathroom taps would turn on and off as well. My sister would go downstairs in the basement, and the bathroom tap in her bathroom there would be running, and she'd always get in trouble because mom never wanted us to leave the water running. Of course, rightly so, because we're wasting water. But she's like, it wasn't me. And it wasn't her. And the same thing would happen upstairs too. Occasionally we'd come in and we'd find the bathroom taps on. And I mean, it was constant like this. This was just constantly how my life was unfolding for me. There'd be constant things that would be occurring. And it just made it really difficult to function as a teenager when you're having these experiences. And although I don't want to say it was all completely bad, because there was some really valuable and important experiences that I'm really incredibly grateful for, where I know, I don't know if it was specifically, let's just say, a ghost, or if it was more like my own intuition or my guides talking to me, or I had like an unseen supporter. But there was a couple times, actually. The first time that I'm thinking about here, that's coming to mind is before we had moved out of the other house, the townhouse, there was a house that I had passed by a few times, and I always got a really creepy feeling and a really creepy vibrational frequency off of the house. So much so that I actually heard, don't walk in front of the house, walk across the street. So anytime I would come close to that house, I would cross the street and walk on the other side. So I wasn't close to the house. And as I kind of just continued to get more comfortable walking to school, and after we had moved from the previous place we lived at, the small townhouse that where I had the sleepover, we were living in this new townhouse. And after I got like comfortable on kind of figuring out how to get to school, I found there was another way that I could get to school that was a little bit more sheltered from wind and weather and stuff. So from the cold and the snow and stuff. So I was actually taking that other way, and I didn't have to walk by this house anymore. But when we moved across into the house, I finished junior high and I went into high school, I had to walk across by this house again. Only this time I had to walk through the back alley to kind of get up to the pathway because it was in a completely different direction. And so don't want to say I forgot about this house, but because I wasn't walking in front of the house, I didn't feel the same creepy vibe. Like I just felt the creepy frequency there, but because I was walking so quickly by it and it was in the back, it felt a little bit different. And so anyway, after about 6 months of walking by this house while I was in grade 10, there was this guy. He was probably early 20s, maybe mid 20s, and he had this, orange Firebird type car that he would always be cleaning in his garage that was in the back alley there. And there was a few times when it got to be a bit warmer after the winter time, kind of in the early spring, snow was still mostly melted, but it was still kind of a little bit on the ground. I got to see that this guy, he was more and more in his garage around the time of when I would come home from school, around that like 3:30 mark. And there was a couple times where I'd walk home. I had a couple friends of mine. We would walk home for a little bit and then we would kind of part ways. And it would be just shortly after this house. And there was a couple times where I was with my friends and they saw this guy. And then there was a few times, most of the time I was kind of by myself. And there was this one particular day where the guy was out in his garage. He was cleaning his car and he kind of said hi to me or whatever. And I didn't engage. I did not say anything back. I just kind of, did like a little and kept walking. And all of a sudden, I heard a voice. And I heard, don't panic, just keep walking. Keep walking, walk fast, like walk quickly, but don't run. And so I was like, I didn't know who said it. I didn't know where it came from. And I just kept walking. And this guy who was with this Firebird, he actually jumped in his car and he started following me down the back alley. Now, thankfully, from where I had passed his house, it was about 3 or 4 houses down from his house where he actually got in his car. And that's right around where I kind of started just before this, I kind of heard the voice. And so it wasn't too much further to the townhouse that we lived in before we moved across the street. And so he started like this car. I was like, I heard the car and I was like, okay, I kind of glanced behind me. I see, because I wanted to make sure I was off to the side, because I would usually walk kind of in the middle of the back alley just to stay away from fences and all that stuff. And I saw that it was him in his car. And then I moved over to the side thinking he was going to pass, but he didn't. He just continued to stay really slow behind me while I walked. Now I was walking pretty quickly. Like if you had seen like a speed walker, you know, when they just like this, I was walking pretty fast. And I had to cross a street and then just, it was not a really busy street, but it was one of the little side streets. And then the row housing community where there was all the parking lot and stuff I could see it after I passed the road. He had to stop and wait at the where the back alley came like met each other, and so he had to stop and wait. So while he stopped and waited there, I was able to get a little bit more ground, I guess you could say, away from him, and so I was able to, you know, get like at least 3 or 4 car lengths from him. And so at this point in time, though, he actually pulls right up beside me and he starts rolling down his window and he says, "Oh, would you like a ride home?" And I said, I didn't say anything actually. I just shook my head and went, "Mm-mm." And then I kept walking. And now I was walking. I wanted everything in me wanted to run. But I was like, nope, don't run. Like I just kept hearing this, don't run, don't run, don't run. Just walk really fast, stay away from the car, walk really fast, stay away from the car. And I just kept hearing this, walk really fast, stay away from the car. And I even backed away a little bit further from the car because I did not want to be close to this vehicle. And I was walking pretty fast. And so by this time where the back alley was, I could literally see my house. And I, at this moment, heard, "Don't go to your house, go around into the back." When I got to the parking lot where, you know, he could have pulled in and whatever, he was like, "Okay, I can give you a ride." He kept trying to persistently get me into his vehicle and says, I can give you a ride." And I says, "No, I'm good. I don't live very far away." And then I heard, "Run and go quickly home." So I knew I had to V-line it. And I ran. So then I V-lined it and I was running. I was jogging. Like I wasn't super running fast, but I felt like I was running super fast. But I ran this way through the parking lot and to the other side of the fence lines of where the house was. And I came around into the back and I waited for him to go past. And then I waited for him to go past because I didn't want him to even see me getting into the house. So because I hid in the backyard in the gate, and then I came in the house, and my mom actually was home, which was really weird because she wasn't actually normally home when we came home from school. And she says, "Teresa, what are you doing? Are you okay?" And then I told her that a guy ended up trying to, you know, get me into his car. Thankfully, my mom called the police and they investigated and nothing ever further happened. But I like to think that a ghostly encounter of some kind or my connection to the unseen really saved me that day to help me figure out what I needed to do to navigate the situation. I mean, because the opposite could have happened and it could have been a very unpleasant encounter for me. There was another instant where I had a guy from school invite me with a group of friends or whatever to go to a movie one particular weekend. It was in early October. And it was so interesting because I didn't really want to go to the movie. But I thought, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll go out, have some fun, watch a movie. And it was really interesting because when they came to pick me up, it was actually his brother who was driving, and his brother had a couple friends with him, and they were older. They were much older. I was only maybe 14 at the time. And they were probably in their teenage, like in high school, maybe around 16, 17 years old. And it was interesting because when I got into the car, I looked through the window and I saw the stars, but it was almost like I also saw my reflection, and I saw the reflection of the guy who invited me, the boy from school, and or another friend of ours, or a friend of his. I knew him, but I didn't really consider him a friend. And I almost kind of saw the reflections of them in the back seat there with me. And while I was looking at the reflections, I also felt like I saw someone on the other side of the window, on the other side of the car. And it was a little bit hard to see because it was late at night. And so there was my face and their faces. And then there was also, you could see a little bit of the faces of the people that were in the front seat. And then there was another like silhouette of a person's face on the other side. And so it was almost like there was like if you look at like when you would take like a picture with the negatives, it was almost like it was like a picture taken over top of another picture on the negative. And when you go to develop it, you could see that there was two pictures taken on the with the same in the same negative. And I was trying to make sense of who and what I was seeing. And I couldn't quite comprehend what they were saying to me, but I know that there was this unconscious exchange of communication because I immediately knew that I needed to get out of the vehicle and that I wouldn't be safe if I didn't get out of the vehicle. So before they even started to pull away, because they were all kind of razzing each other, it was really weird. And I said, yeah, I'm good. I don't want to go to the movie. Let me out. And I immediately got out of the car and I went back home. Now, I don't know if anything would have happened to me that night or if this was just my own hesitation about wanting to go out with a group of people because remember, I was pretty much a shut-in. Like I connected with the unseen world more than I connected with people of the tangible, physical, vibrational frequency that you could physically see with the eyes. And so I don't really know if anything would have happened if it was just more of a like a feeling of like I didn't want to leave home. But I trust that whoever showed up outside that car that night, and I couldn't quite make them out, was protecting me and was giving me the insight to stay safe. And so these two specific experiences really helped me to use the discernment piece as well. Because even though there was this skepticism, of sharing out these experiences with other people, and I didn't share them with very many people for sure. And there was definitely this fear around much of this. There was this deeper fascination and this deeper curiosity, I guess you could say, even that was sparking and that was driving me forward in a lot of ways. And it was helping me to discern what I could trust and what I couldn't trust. And that was a really beautiful gift. Now looking back from, 20 years later, 20 plus years later, that the younger experiences in my teen helped me to develop. So that was really amazing for me and a really big chapter and a really big piece for how I interacted with the unseen world, or even how I didn't interact with the unseen world, and how I interacted with myself. And I will say that when I turned the dimmer switch down, even though things still flooded in, I just wasn't overwhelmed in the same capacity. And I think that too, for me, was really necessary because it allowed me to feel a little bit disconnected from that intense experience of seeing, feeling, hearing, knowing all of these ins and out pieces of the unseen world that nobody else could see and that I really couldn't share with anybody. And in this next chapter, I guess you could say, that I'll share in another video, where I start to take and cultivate these experiences from my teens, and I start to soften and transform that fear into love over the next little bit. That too was a really necessary chapter for me. I'm really grateful for my teenhood years and all the experiences that I had in there, from the dreams and connecting and the communication with the dreams, to being confronted repeatedly with the ghosts, and even seeing the communication in a more beautiful way, where I knew there was a man at my window, even though even though why would I want a man in my bedroom? And so this really was beginning stages of breaking down the I guess you could say, the energy barriers, the walls of fear around my abilities, so that I could enter into the next chapter of starting to transform that. So, so with that, all of that being said, I would love to hear your further ghostly encounters and or just really profound experiences that helped to shift and shape you into the person that you are today, into connecting in with your own trust and your own innate wisdom that you're holding and you're carrying, so that you could bring forward who you are and harness those gifts and abilities that you hold as well. So thank you so much for listening and watching and taking this beautiful journey with me on helping us to uncover and unravel all things ghostly and softening everything with love. Have an amazing rest of your day.